Welcome everybody to today's webinar, Conducting Effective Daily Stand-Up Meetings. I'm Kevin Aguanno and I'll be your host. I've got a long background in project management in general, along with specific expertise in Agile and Lean and other practices. And I've combined a lot of this expertise in understanding the practice of daily stand-up meetings. I've used them now since the 90s. Some of these techniques have become regular practices for me on all kinds of projects, waterfall, Agile, and some of the stops in between. And I'm here today to share with you some of the tips and tricks that I've learned over the years that have helped me use this as an effective technique to improve team performance. If you want to find out more about me, you can look up my bio and contact information at procept.com/team/Kevin-Aguanno. It's at the bottom of the slide. Okay, so our agenda for today. I'm going to talk about what is a daily stand-up meeting. Let's get some clarity around that first. I'm going to talk about 3 key questions that are used to keep people focused so the meetings don't drag on. So what are the 3 key questions we need to follow to keep these meetings effective and efficient? Should our clients or managers, bosses, participate in these meetings? Or in Scrum, should the product owner participate in these meetings? Can we do these virtually or do they have to be face-to-face? Do they work in different industries or just in IT? And what are the signs that things are going wrong? Now, I'm going to ask you to save your Q&A for the end and I'll answer questions then. So first off, what is a daily stand-up meeting? And my definition is a daily stand-up meetings, of course it's daily, it's short. It's a daily short standing meeting where people stand up, that's much as obvious, where colleagues focus on helping each other avoid and solve problems that impact productivity. The focus here is on staying efficient, looking at productivity, trying to improve productivity. The point of these meetings is to make the team more effective and efficient. However, why do we want to do these daily? And here's a picture in the corner from a daily meeting. Now, this one's not a stand-up, but these are daily meetings done by the police department. You might remember the old show Hill Street Blues, where the police sergeant in the squad room would stand up at the podium, and every day he would have a quick meeting with all his officers before they go out on patrol. And he'd say, this neighbor, keep your eyes out in this neighborhood. There was a peeping Tom. You want to keep an eye out for that. Check these particular alleys. There was a couple fires in the neighborhood over the last week. Keep an eye out for an arsonist. Here's a photo I've distributed to everybody of a guy where we've got an APB out for. Any questions? Anybody have any problems in their areas? Okay, everybody go have a safe day, right? So it's a short daily meeting to sort of kick off the day. Sometimes they're called daily huddles. Sometimes they're called daily kickoffs, right? But the idea is that it's a quick touch point at the start of a day to give people direction for the day. Why daily? Well, first of all, if we do this frequently, like every day, we minimize disruptions to productivity. If somebody's having a problem, that problem doesn't persist day after day after day after day, waiting for a weekly status meeting, right? And we could have the problem repeated all week. We find out about a problem within 24 hours and we can jump right on it and fix it, right? We avoid problems lingering and festering and getting worse. We can jump on them while there's small problems before they grow into big problems. It also gives the project manager or the one facilitating the meeting better visibility into the progress that's being made and issues that need to be fixed. And even the team members can see each other's issues and the progress they're making to help build morale, to feel a sense of momentum. And it creates an environment of accountability where people are expected daily to make progress. They're expected to be accountable for why you didn't get your work done yesterday, right? So the idea is it builds a sense of commitment and team bonding and accountability. And one good tip for doing these daily meetings is to choose a standard time slot, a regular time that works for everybody on the team. And whether that's first thing in the morning, that's the most common time. If you go work from 9 to 5, I wouldn't do it right at 9. I'd probably do it at quarter after or 9:30. give people a chance to get in, take their coat off, check their email first before coming to the meeting, right? What if there's a delay finding parking spots or public transit was delayed? You don't want them to miss the meeting. So I'd hold it a little bit after the start of the day, or sometimes they do it after lunch, because you may have somebody who is time share or job sharing, or somebody's time shifted. Their work may start at a different time. So you might have it partway through the day, for those that are coming in a bit later. For them, it's the start of their work day. For the rest of the team, it's partway through the day, but you can set your priorities for the afternoon and the next morning. Now, I'm talking about daily meetings. You're thinking, oh my gosh, all these extra meetings, isn't that wasteful? And it can be, right? More meetings, I just imagine that would kill your productivity. So the trick to keeping these meetings efficient is, first of all, clearly define who's in charge, who's the facilitator, right? So that way there's not too many chefs in the kitchen, right? Keep the group small. A meeting with 10 people can go quickly. A meeting with 100 people is just naturally going to take more time, because more people have to respond to questions, provide input, have an opinion. So keep the group small. Sometimes if you have a large group that needs to, a large team, maybe you'll have what they call a scrum of scrums, right? The idea is that you have a meeting, a number of meetings with small groups, the specialty groups, the different cliques, they all have their little meetings, and then one representative from each come together for the overall meeting. Maybe that's a possibility. Keep the group focused on the goal of the meeting, and the goal is not to give management an update on what's going on. This isn't a status reporting meeting. That's not the intent. It's actually a problem avoidance and solving meeting, sort of, right? Fixing and avoiding problems in the first place. It's a meeting that's intended for team members to help each other out in the face of problems. It has nothing to do with management or status reporting. So stay focused on problem solving. And lastly, keep the meeting short. How short? Well, best practice is 15 minutes or less. Now you're probably thinking, how do you have a 15-minute meeting? It takes people 15 minutes to show up for my meetings sometimes. Well, there are some tricks, right? One of them is you can, start and end on time, right? If somebody's 10 minutes late for a 10-minute meeting, that's pretty embarrassing. You could bring donuts, but one less than the number of people you've invited to the meeting. So the last one there doesn't get a donut. I'm just joking on that one, but it is a somewhat effective technique. No, really, ideally, there are some techniques, right? Stay focused and hold the meeting standing up. Now, why standing, you ask? Well, meetings tend to go faster if people are uncomfortable, right? If it's uncomfortable for them, the meeting will go faster. And what do you mean? Well, for example, standing in heels. If I'm standing in heels and I'm there for a 3-hour meeting, my feet are going to be killing me long before that meeting's over. Don't ask me how I know this. It's a long story of a very unfortunate Halloween costume. Anyway, so sometimes, you want people to be a little bit uncomfortable. The meeting will just naturally take more time. If we're sitting down, people get comfortable. And when they get comfortable, they relax. And when they relax, everything just naturally takes more time. But if we're standing, people tend to be more alert, right? They want things to be productive. They're saying, hurry on, let's get through the agenda so I can go sit down because my feet hurt. People can also move around if they want to see something or see a person who's talking better, or want to stand next to them because they have a common interest or a common problem. There's the ability for people to move around a little bit easier. And I mean, this movement is good for you. There's some health benefits to getting out of your chair and moving around. They say every hour and a half, we should get up out of our chairs and stretch our backs and go for a little walk to get the blood circulating, avoid blood clots and back problems, right? So that's helpful as well. And it's better for collaboration. Say a team is prioritizing things with Post-it notes on a whiteboard or something. Instead of calling out where somebody should place one, why don't you go over and just move the sticker, right? So that movement is a good thing. And lastly, if you're standing, that sort of commands your attention. It's harder to hide that somebody's doing email or texting on their phone when they're standing. It's a little bit more obvious, a little bit less obvious if they're sitting down. Right? Overall, standing meetings are much more productive. And this is going on in many organizations. I did some work for Miloš Monex, which is renamed into TD Insurance, TD Bank. Their insurance division in Montreal actually renovated their offices several years ago to actually remove the chairs from their meeting rooms and put these higher tables, these higher desks that you couldn't sit down at if you wanted. In the middle of the meeting room is just a long, high, elbow high table, kind of like you'd see in a bar or nightclub, just wide enough there that if you needed to put something down or your laptop or a cup of coffee, you got something to rest it on, but not high enough that you could sit on it or pull a chair up to it or anything like that. So, they actually renovated their offices to make stand-up meetings more applicable. So, there is a good practice in this, and companies around the world have been doing this for many years. Another thing that you can do to make the meetings really short is stay very focused, hyper-focused. Ask everyone 3 questions, and people answer these 3 questions and these 3 questions only. No side discussions, no getting lost in detailed off-topic discussions about what happened on the weekend or what happened on the sports game last night. Everyone focuses on 3 questions and 3 questions only. And there's one about the past, one about the present, and one about the future. Now, the question about the past is, are there any problems you're experiencing that are preventing you from completing your work yesterday? This is the question about the past. Has anything stopped you from completing your work? If so, what is it? Now, some people in the Scrum community, one of the Agile practices called Scrum, some people in the Scrum community use a slightly different question. They say, did you get your work done yesterday, right? Or what did you get done yesterday? And I would argue that's not the best use of the first question. The best use is, what were the problems that you experienced completing that work, right? Or that you're still encountering that we could fix. This is daily issue identification. Because we do this every 24 hours, everybody on the team now has a structured structured opportunity to ask their peers for help. Nobody is struggling day after day after day with a problem when the person sitting right next to them has the answer. This is the opportunity for them to speak up, and we turn to every single person on the team and we ask them this question, right? Everybody in the meeting, did you experience any problems completing your work yesterday? The assumption is no, and that the work got done. But if there are problems, now's your chance to call it out. Because maybe, just maybe, the person sitting next to you knows the answer, and you can get that answer right away within 24 hours before this problem festers and grows and becomes a bigger issue. So this gives us the chance to nip these problems in the bud within 24 hours, right? Get them right off the bat. So that's that first question. Are there any problems completing your work yesterday? Now, the reason I don't like the Scrum version of that question, the classic Scrum version of that question is, what did you do yesterday, or what did you complete yesterday, is because of the second question. The second question is about the present, and it's, what are you going to work on today? If I'm asking this every 24 hours, if I'm doing this daily, every 24 hours, that means yesterday I asked them, what are you going to work on today? Now it's the next day, and I'm saying, hey, what did you work on yesterday, or what did you get done yesterday? They'll say, idiot, you were there, I told you, right? It's not a useful question if you say, what did you get done yesterday, or what were you working on yesterday? Far better would be, because the natural answer, if they say no, the next question is, okay, so what was the problem? So why don't we just ask that right off the bat? What were the problems, or were there any problems completing your work yesterday? Right? So if we ask that as the first question, the second question, what are you going to work on today, is a useful question, but I'm not asking it to micromanage people. I ask it because it builds an opportunity for collaboration and coordination. Collaboration, because somebody might say, oh, you're working on that? Gee, I've always wanted to learn, can I watch? Now, 2 of us will know how to do it. Or, hey, I've got some reusable assets, some softwares that I wrote, or a document that's partially completed from a last project, or that you can use as a template that might be somewhat useful, or lessons learned from the past that you might find helpful with what you're going to today. right? This is an opportunity for knowledge transfer, mentoring, collaboration, sharing, and it's an opportunity for coordination. Because when you say, hey, I'm going to work on this thing, ABC, I'm going to work on ABC today, somebody else might say, whoa, 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 that may impact what I was going to do today. So why don't you and I stay behind after this meeting and talk it through so we can coordinate our work so we don't step on each other's toes. We don't impact each other today. We don't get in each other's way. Right? So this is a very useful question because it avoids problems in the first place. It avoids, why we didn't get our work done yesterday, right? Or why there's issues, right? So we sort of solve them in advance by identifying them here. So the first question is about solving issues right away. And if we don't actually solve the problem in the meeting. We don't do a long, detailed explanation about, why this machine is operating poorly. You say, does anybody know the answer to Bob's problem? And if somebody does, you say, great, you two stay behind after this meeting and talk about it afterwards, because the rest of us just want to get through these questions and then go back and continue on with our work. We don't want to solve it in the meeting because the solution of that problem might take an hour, and now this 15-minute meeting is taking an hour and 15 minutes. And that's just to solve one problem. Right? So we don't solve the problems in the meeting. We identify the problem and identify if somebody knows the answer or thinks they can help. Then we pair those people up and we say, okay, you guys stay behind after this meeting's over and you could talk it through or problem solve or set up a meeting later in the day to go over it. I'll leave that up to you guys to coordinate. Right? The second question, what are you going to work on today? Is avoiding problems by coordinating our work. And what's the third question? And no, it's not what are you going to work on tomorrow. The third question is about the future, but instead of looking at what we're going to work on tomorrow, we're going to look at risks. Do you see any new risks that are going to impact our success, that are going to impact our performance on this initiative or against our goals? Sometimes they describe these as, do you see any speed bumps or roadblocks, anything that could potentially impact us? Right, so this is really risk identification. So question 1 is issue identification. Question 3 is risk identification. This technique is so focused on risk avoidance that we check every day for any new risks. So it's a very, very focused, efficient approach looking at anything that could impact our performance. The first question, are there issues with performance? Let's fix them right away. Question 2, right? Trying to improve performance by collaboration, knowledge transfer, and avoid problems with the coordination aspect. And question 3, looking ahead into the future for possible future things that could impact our performance and efficiency. So very, very focused on performance improvement. And remember, no side discussions. You don't want two people sitting around talking about the answer to some question or just talking about what's happening with their new dog, right? You don't want to have that because now everybody else is sitting around thinking, why am I here? I don't care about this answer. It doesn't impact what I'm doing. Now I'm just wasting time. I could be getting work done, right? So no side discussions. You need really crisp facilitation. Don't solve the problems during the meeting and don't have all these off-topic discussions. Okay, now we're going to move on. The next thing we should look at is, should we be inviting people's managers, bosses, or clients to this daily stand-up meeting, sometimes called a daily Scrum meeting? Should we invite managers or clients to participate? What do you think? Just type your answer in the chat window. Okay, I see some mix of answers, some yeses, some no's, a no way with an exclamation point. I see quite some emphatic answers there. Okay, it depends. So let me give you sort of the best practice here. One of the things you got to worry about is if managers or clients are in the room, you're not going to get the true answers to those prior 3 questions. Specifically, the first question, were there any problems completing your work yesterday? If somebody's boss is in the room, or God forbid your client is in the room, people might say, no problems. No, everything was fine, because they want to hide the problems from their client. They don't want to lose the business or end up with a dissatisfied client, right? Or they don't want their boss to find out that they're not performing effectively. So what may end up happening is they don't tell the truth to that question, right? What you don't want are disappointed clients because they're hearing that there's problems and they thought you guys knew what you were doing. Or you don't want somebody's boss or a client interfering, hearing that there's problems or hearing that things aren't going well, and then intervening, trying to solve problems, trying to micromanage, right? You don't want that happening, so you're not going to get the truth. So, some people might even not share the answers because they're afraid that performance reviews are coming up, and I don't want it to affect my performance review, right? That I didn't do perfectly. So the best practice is not to ask people's bosses or managers or their clients to participate. If the managers want to know what's going on the project, I'll have a separate discussion with them later in the day. I'll catch them up on what's going on, because I can be a little bit more diplomatic in my answers and how I share that information. For example, in the daily stand-up meeting, where there are problems completing your work yesterday, somebody might say, yeah, Farhad sent me the wrong data. That's the third time in a row. Farhad, you got to get your act together. You're wasting my time, trying to correct all the data when you send me the wrong data. Now, that's just team members venting with each other and trying to problem solve. But if the manager's in the room, maybe even Farhad's manager, he's going to hear that and get upset with Farhad and maybe affect his performance. And I don't want to have team members throwing each other under the bus, because then this gets very political, and people stop sharing what's really going on because they're afraid of a blowback, right, from other team members. So instead, I have the meeting without the managers, and then later in the day, I'll go back to Farhad's manager who wanted to know what was going on in the meeting, and I'll just say, there was some problems about understanding roles and responsibilities, or there was a problem a little bit with some quality, or people weren't double checking their work before they sent it, but we've clarified the problem. The team has come up with a solution and it's no longer an issue, right? We think we've got it solved. So, I can be a little bit more, a little bit careful with how I phrase the messages to protect the individuals on the team. Okay, moving on. Can you do this virtually? What do you think? Can you have these daily stand-up meetings virtually? We're all working in distributed teams these days, especially under the COVID scenario that many of us are working from home. Can you do daily stand-ups virtually? What do you think? Okay, I'm looking at the chat window. I'm seeing a few yeses. I'm seeing a couple no's. Well, the best answer is absolutely yes. You can do this virtually, and I've had teams doing this virtually for 15, 20 years now. We can do it via the phone, right? You can have an open bridge line or teleconference line, but I find desktop video conferencing solutions like Skype and Zoom and things like that are just so much better. The tools are free these days. Most people have access to a webcam. If you don't, they're like $20. And I find that being able to see a team member's face, whether it's one person who's remote, like in the picture on the screen, or whether your entire team is a group of people who are remote, seeing each other's faces builds a sense of team bonding and especially helps with commitment and trust. You can see if somebody's sketchy, if somebody looks like they're shifty or they're lying or they're trying to deceive you. You can pick up some body language clues. And it's harder to lie to somebody when you're looking them in the face, even if it's virtually, right? People feel more of a sense of responsibility that is a little bit easier to avoid when you're just hearing their voice only, and even worse via text or email. So these video conferencing solutions are inexpensive and very effective at improving team bonding and improving productivity as well. But I would suggest you still stand if possible. The meetings will go more quickly. So even if people are at home in front of a webcam, have them stand up, right? The meeting will go quicker. I've even had an example where a team was mostly co-located. There was one person who was remote, and somebody on the team, they stood in a circle and somebody held a laptop with a webcam on it for the remote person, and they were the stand-in for that remote person. They would turn the laptop towards the person who was speaking, so they could the person on the remote connection would be able to see who's speaking, and that way there was like a representative for that person in the room. And when the person who's holding the laptop wanted to speak, they would just put it down on a chair or a stool and would stand back so the remote person could see them as well. This technique is not unique to Agile or Scrum or even IT. It's used across many different industries. For example, in the distribution industry, this is commonly done at the start of a shift or when they receive some very large orders, so they can prioritize the processing of those orders, how it's going to be packed and shipped, talking about how it's going to be handled at the loading dock for loading, unloading trucks, so they can kind of coordinate that work. It's done in manufacturing, right? Often at shift changes to talk about, for the last crew, were there problems completing all your work? And they said, yeah, machine 3 was acting up. We've kind of jury rigged it. It's kind of working, but somebody may want to, keep an eye on it. It's on the fritz. We've ordered a spare part. Just, keep a close eye on it so it doesn't create defects, right? So that might be part of it. So, were there anything we should know? Yeah, we didn't get all of our orders processed. You're gonna start with a few of them in progress. You're gonna have to finish up those before you start your quota, right? So it's the team talking back and forth. Maybe the foreman from the old group addresses the foreman in the new group coming in to give them a sort of a status update, right? An update on what's going on. What are the problems? It's done in the construction industry, right? You often see on a job site these coffee trucks pulling up. They honk their little horn, their little air horn, and then all the workers come down to sit down and grab a sticky bun and a coffee, take a break. Well, you know what? What happens is all the electricians hang out together, the plumbers hang out in a separate group, the HVAC guys in a different group. But you often see the lead from each of those groups, the foreman or the lead hand from each of those groups will come together and chat with each other and say, hey, what are you guys doing today? Oh, we're working up on the 4th floor. And somebody will say, oh, geez, we were going to work on the 4th floor. You know what? Let's just stay out of your way. We'll start on the 5th today. So that way we're not stepping on each other's toes, right? They're avoiding problems. Or somebody might ask, do you have any problems or any issues? And somebody might say, yeah, I got a materials delivery coming in at noon, but I got nowhere to put it because all your materials are in the way. And they might say, oh, you know what, I can move some of that stuff and make room for you. Let's do that right after this meeting so you've got a space for your delivery. Is that good? So they can solve each other's problems and help each other out. That's done on construction sites. They don't call it a daily scrum or a daily stand-up meeting, but effectively that's what's going on. As I mentioned before, it's used in law enforcement and military, even sometimes in the fire department when emergency responders like firemen approach a very large, complex scene. They don't just jump out of the truck and start hooking up fire hoses. They quickly get together, have a quick huddle. Okay, how are we going to approach this, guys? Okay, I hear that it's broken out onto the other side. I want you guys to take this truck around the back. You get the ladder up to the roof. Okay, what else are we going to do? Somebody says, I'll get I think we're going to need another truck. Let me order one up from the other fire station, right? They start to talk about how they're going to approach the problem. They don't just all run at it without a plan, right? They take a few minutes, come up with a plan, and if there are issues, they rehuddle. They pull a few people back and problem solve and reprioritize if necessary. We also use it in executive management in businesses. I can give you an example of a large Canadian bank that in its executive suite, a number of the vice presidents have these daily stand-up meetings in a boardroom. Nobody's allowed to sit in a chair because that makes the meeting take too long. They call them daily kickoffs or daily coordination meetings, but they just come in, start of the day at a particular time. All the direct reports for that vice president are expected to show up in the meeting room, and they do a quick daily scrum. Did you guys have any problems yesterday that we need to know about that we can help you solve? No. Okay, what's everybody working on today? We're doing this, we're doing that. Somebody will say, oh my gosh, that's important for me too. Well, I'll talk to you after the meeting. Anybody need any help with anything? No, okay. Any new risks we need to be aware of? And somebody will say, yeah, there's an audit coming, or I heard this. on the news this morning, great. Anybody who needs to discuss that, stay behind. Okay, everybody, let's go start our day, right? These morning kickoff meetings, very, very effective. This is not just an IT solution. It's not just an Agile thing. These are used across many different organizations. So what are some common questions we hear about when doing these kinds of daily stand-up meetings or daily coordination meetings? Well, one of the first ones I often hear is, should I document formal meeting minutes for this meeting? Well, if you think about it, we're doing these every 24 hours. So whatever you write down would be irrelevant by the next day because you're going to be asking those questions all over again. Certainly some things may get written down. So the first question, were there any issues completing your work yesterday? Well, if there aren't issues that can be solved right there on the spot or right after the meeting, they should probably get written down in some kind of issue log so they can get tracked and managed and be dealt with, right, by management. So you would document any outstanding issues and the risks that are identified with that third question. Are there any new risks that you see that can impact our team's success, our organization's success? That might absolutely be something that you want to write down in a risk log or a risk register, and you take appropriate risk management actions around those. But the rest of the discussion, who's doing what today and who's, not particularly relevant because it's going to change, right, by tomorrow. So I wouldn't necessarily document the meeting minutes, although sometimes I do, with the team's permission, record the meeting and throw it up on a SharePoint drive or something. So if there's questions later about a risk or an issue, we can go back and re-listen to it, but I often don't do that either. Next question, does it really have to be daily? Do we have to do these meetings every day? Or what if my team members are working on multiple projects? They all have 5 things on the go, and on any given day, they might not have worked on this project at all. So holding another daily Scrum meeting the next day would be a waste of time. So do we really have to do it? And the answer is of course not, right? Use it as a tool if it makes sense for your team to improve efficiency. It is a good practice. It's a very good practice, but maybe daily is too often for you and your group. If you're extremely multitasking on multiple initiatives, then maybe doing it, try it a couple times a week, like a Monday, Thursday, or something like that. Or maybe instead of that, we do it once a week, right? Maybe we do it every Friday. We'll do it every Friday, just sort of coordinate our work for the week. If we're not working on this particular initiative every day or even every couple days, maybe weekly is fine. It all depends on how productive your team is and how intense the pace of work is. Next question. Are there situations where you wouldn't do it at all? And the answer is of course. For example, if the team is co-located, if the team is working together in a war room type environment, right? They're all working in one consolidated location and they are very good communicators all day long. They're talking back and forth to each other. Then they already have all of this communications. I can give you an example. I worked at one large institution, and they had a software development team working right alongside the testing team. They were all in one large open concept area. And the software development, all day long, the team is talking back and forth. Somebody might yell out, "Hey, Fred, I think I found a defect. You want to come over and take a look at my screen for a second?" Somebody else will say, "Oh, is that related to the XYZ process?" And somebody say, "Yeah." And they said, "Don't worry about it. I'm changing it right now. That's a temporary issue. I'll have it fixed in a second." "Oh, okay, thanks. Does anybody, I'm having a problem with this. Does anybody know, can somebody come and help me? Or can somebody take a look at this? I need a second set of eyes to make sure it's correct before I proceed." If the team are constantly talking back and forth all day long and helping each other with problems, and they're not shy about approaching their peers, then you don't need the daily Scrum meetings. They're already doing that. But if your team is working in different floors of a building, different buildings, different cities, different countries, then we might want to set up these more formal daily stand-up meetings, or even if you do it virtually, to give them the opportunity to communicate formally with each other, to ask for help if they're having problems, and to identify risks and issues, and even avoiding potential problems by sharing what they're working on next, right? So it's very important that you use this when you can, but there are times when it's not as relevant. And lastly, what are some signs that things are going wrong, right? If we're doing these daily scrums, what are the indicators that you're not getting the best value out of them? Well, the first one is if people aren't attending your session, right? You're not getting the full team showing up. This is because commonly people don't see personal value in going. They think it's a waste of time. Maybe people are, they're happening too frequently, so people haven't made any progress since the last one. So what's the point in going? So how do you fix this? Maybe your meetings are too long. They're taking too much time, so people aren't seeing the value. So facilitate better, so there's no side discussions in the meeting. Maybe people aren't focused on problem resolution, right? Or avoiding problems. They're having discussions about things that are not particularly about improving performance, right? There's some things you can do to fix that. The next one is, what if people are there, but they're not participating? Well, same as above, you can make sure the meeting's not too long, make sure it's focused on productivity, but I can also maybe look at the participants who aren't participating are shy. Maybe the facilitator is not giving them enough equal time. Maybe there's somebody dominating on the team who's stealing all the time, and the others just don't have a voice, right? Feel fearful about speaking up or don't have the chance. So a good facilitator can work on that. Or maybe there's too many people interrupting each other, in which case you can try a technique. I've seen people pass around a stress ball, one of those squeezy stress balls, or even a stapler, and they called it the magic stapler. And they would pass it from person to person. Whoever's holding the stapler or the ball has the floor. They get to speak. Everybody else just has to listen, right? And everybody gets to answer the question, and then it gets moved on. The only person who's allowed to interrupt is the facilitator if people are taking too long or getting off topic, right? So that's another way of avoiding interruptions. Or maybe people aren't participating because their boss is in the room or their client is in the room, right? And they're very fearful about sharing something that might get them in trouble, right? So be very careful about that. Sometimes it's just political, right? Sometimes they're not speaking up because it's political and they just don't know what to say that won't get them in trouble. Another sample, that a sign that something's wrong, is if people are taking too long in their answers. The meeting is dragging on. It's taking too long. It's not 15 minutes. It's 45 minutes, an hour and a half. This is usually caused by poor facilitation. You're allowing side discussions, people solving the problems in the meeting, not just identifying who has the answers and pairing them up, but actually doing some problem analysis and problem solving in the meeting. That is a fine line. You want to allow maybe a little bit of questioning about the problem to make sure you do have a solution or not, so you can help the person, but too much of it, and it chews up too much of the meeting time. Sometimes people just complaining about stuff instead of identifying real issues. They're complaining about stuff that we have no control over. I saw one where people were complaining. I said, are there any risks or issues that are going to prevent us from meeting our commitments? And they went on and on about COVID. Well, yeah, with COVID, we might get sick. People are taking, and they might shut down the economy, and they're going on and on about, risks and things about, vaccination might not be effective. It's like, I have no control over that. You have no control over that. So let's not focus on that. Let's focus on things we can do something about, right? If you let people just whine that they're, about their backs hurting or, their marital problems, it's not focused on improving the productivity of the team and the organization. Those kinds of discussions should be held privately or in another forum. So you need good, crisp facilitation to solve some of that. And lastly, you might see a situation where people are hiding their problems. They're not actually sharing them. When you ask, are there any problems completing your work yesterday? They say no, or they say nothing. Meanwhile, they had huge problems. This is often a sign that, there may be a boss or client in the room. As I said before, people may have fear that answering that question may affect their performance review or invite them to, for ridicule by their peers. Often this happens in very political environments, right? People just need to keep their mouths shut because they know it's a hot potato. They don't want to raise that issue. And sometimes it's a personality thing. People just don't feel safe admitting they have problems. And it's the goal of the facilitator for this meeting to ensure that all the people feel safe. Often I say, we have Vegas rules. Anything that happens in the meeting stays in the meeting, right? So sometimes we look at the personalities of the people involved and do what we can to make sure they feel safe and secure. We set up some team rules, set up some team norms around this. So those are my tips for conducting effective daily stand-up meetings. It's really straightforward. Keep the meetings short, keep them focused, ask those 3 questions, one about the past, one about the present, one about the future, and make sure that people are collaborative and problem solving and coordinating with each other, and you'll get huge benefits. Okay, at this point, I'll open up for questions. Are there any questions? You can type your questions in the chat window. Okay, there's some comments. People are saying, yeah, we do this at my company. We don't call it that. Daily kickoffs. Good. They call it just a team meeting. Okay, fair enough. Are you seeing any value from doing these techniques? Oh, lots of yeses. Tremendous. Excellent. Somebody says they'd like to try. They think this will help. Somebody asked, isn't this an Agile technique? Well, certainly it's a technique that is core to the Scrum methodology. Scrum is one of the Agile family of methodologies, right? Agile has many different flavors. One of them is called Scrum, and these are called sometimes daily Scrum meetings because this is a core technique of Scrum, not the only one, but it's one of the core techniques of Scrum. But these techniques, as I've shown you, have been used for many, many years in many industries. It has nothing unique to Scrum about these meetings. They've been present for many years in many industries. In fact, when Scrum was invented originally, this technique was borrowed from studying what was going on in Japanese manufacturers, and they were doing this. They weren't in any, they weren't Agile. Agile didn't exist yet. However, there were lean techniques, and this was perhaps one of the lean techniques that we learned from the Japanese that was adopted into Agile. But these techniques have been around for a long, long time. Okay, any other questions or comments? Somebody asked, is there a certification, a micro credential? They spelt a bit off there. Is there a micro credential for running these meetings? Not that I'm aware of. Certainly knowing how to run these meetings effectively is part of a Scrum Master training, for example, so you can get a Scrum Master certification. But this technique is, I think, too simple to warrant its own certification in my mind. But you're welcome to use it on both Agile and Waterfall or any project or not even projects, just in daily operations. I know teams that do these on an operational basis, right? As we talked about in the examples at shift changes in factories and stuff, they hold these quick little stand-up meetings at the start of their shift. Any more questions? Just type them in the chat window. Thank you, Fatima. Lovely comment. She was, thank you. Yeah, no, she was. She liked my presentation. Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you very much, everybody. It's been a great session. We've run for exactly 45 minutes. I appreciate your time. This will be recorded and put up on YouTube at a later time for your further reference. So keep an eye out for it if you want to watch it again. Thank you much, everybody. Bye for now.